Welcome back to the morning show.
It is Wise Guys Wednesday, and we're joined, of course, by U of I professor Mats Selen today. So, Mats, tell us, I have a feeling, but what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the moon because it's been in the news, and if you walked outside and looked at the moon yesterday morning, you saw it as big as you've been able to see it and as bright as you've been able to see it since about 1948, as it turns out. And so the moon is fascinating in its own right. So I thought we could talk about the moon and then set up some stuff for other weeks. But anyways, if we go, first of all, to the first video, it should be a movie that basically shows the phases. No, not that one.
The other first video.
The other first video. Anyways, there we go. Okay, so that one shows the Earth spinning. And so you see the Earth turns around once every 24 hours. You see the moon going around the Earth once every 27 days or so. And you can see why we have the phases of the moon. Like, so right now in the video, you have a full moon because the bright side of the moon is facing the Earth.
Okay.
And then a little while later, when the moon is on the other side, basically on the same side as the sun, then the dark side of the moon is facing the Earth, and it looks like a new moon. Okay, so once a month we get either a full moon or a new moon, and then we get the phases in between. The one thing that's wrong with this video, just because it's difficult to show, is that the scale is a bit wrong. So if you can come back to us, I can show you.
Okay.
So right, the size of the moon is about a quarter the size of the Earth in terms of radius. Okay, so it's about like this, but the distance is about 30 Earth diameters away. So that would, since this thing's about a foot, this would have to be about 30 feet in the other room over there. So if I want to really show the scale of this thing, if this little racquetball is the Earth, this little tiny marble is the moon, then they would be separated by my 2 arms lengths. So sort of like this, right?
Okay.
So that's really, really far away. Okay. Now, the moon goes around the Earth in an almost circular orbit at about 20 or 240,000 miles away. Like I said, 30 diameters. But it's not quite a circular orbit. So, okay, so you're going to be the Earth. Here you are. Okay. Here is the orbit of the moon. Okay. So if we look like this would be a circular orbit, but it's not quite circular. It's a little bit elliptical, and that means that the Earth is over to one side a little bit, so sometimes the orbit is closer to the Earth, sometimes it's farther away. When it's closer, it's called perigee, and when it's farther, it's apogee. And so that means that when the moon is closest to the Earth, that's when it can look bigger and brighter. So a supermoon is just a coincidence between when you happen to have a full moon and at the very same time, it's at that closest to the Earth position, right? And that happens a couple of times, several times a year. It's not that rare, but there's other things that perturb the orbit of the moon, so that it changes a little bit over time, like things like the sun and the other planets pulling on it. So sometimes it's a bit closer and sometimes it's a bit farther. And so if you look at the next picture, actually the next video, there we go. It's a video that shows the moon wobbling. There we go. Can we get that started? Okay, so anyways, yeah, there we go. And so what this shows, if you look at it carefully, is the phases of the moon, but also the apparent size of the moon as a function of time. So you see this thing, the moon appears to wobble a little bit, and it appears to go back and forth a little bit, okay? So the one thing that's really interesting is the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
So that means that the moon's day is a month long, which is kind of fascinating. But also you can see it kind of going farther away and then closer in again, and that's that thing I talked about where the orbit is a bit elliptical.
Sure.
Okay, so if we go to the next picture now, you can see the difference between the moon. No, there should be one. Anyways, there's another picture that shows the moon when it says, there we go. So that's the difference in size between the moon that when it's close to the Earth, which is the sort of big one, and superimposed on it on the left side is when it's as far away as it can be. So when it's the difference between closest and farthest in diameter is about 12%.
Wow, okay.
So that makes a pretty big difference in the brightness of the moon. And so that's why we're right now at that supermoon phase when it's very, very close to the Earth. Okay, and so we can go to the next picture.
Yep.
Since I'm sure we're running out of time.
Got about 1 minute.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So there's this satellite that's actually orbiting the moon, and several of them that NASA has up there. All these pictures are from NASA. They have amazing websites and pictures on these websites. And so these lunar satellites have taken amazing pictures that were used to create the videos that you saw. In this picture here, you can see the Earth in the background, and you can see the moon in the foreground. So this is basically the Earth rising over the moon. Which is pretty cool, right? And so that's neat. And then one other picture, the very last one, is cool also, it just shows the surface of the moon, and this is a picture looking down, and you can see where Apollo 15 landed. It's right in the middle of the picture. You can see tire tracks where that little lunar rover scooted around on the surface of the moon. They parked the lunar rover over on the right-hand side, and then they left. And the stuff is, so there's very little weather on the moon, as we know, and so the stuff is basically undisturbed the way it was a long time ago. So that's very, very cool. So this gives us an excuse to talk about other things to do with the moon, like eclipses and things, and we can do that some other time.
Okay, and you're always, as you mentioned, looking for ideas. You want to hear people's questions.
I want to have ideas for questions or questions from viewers, anything that we can talk about that people are interested in, I would love to talk about. So please send questions.
Very good. All right, Mats, thanks so much. You can post those questions on our Morning Show Facebook page. We'll be right back.